Hey everyone, this is Steve Good, and welcome back to our next episode of the Coin Chat. Today we're doing a bit of an emergency episode on how to keep our coins safe. So once again, Yuri Cataldo is back with us, as is our resident technical expert, Joe Wasson. Welcome back, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Hi,
Steve.
Yuri. Hi, Steve.
How are you, Joe?
Hi, Joe. Thanks, Steve.
Your coins are safe, Joe?
My coins are safe.
That's good to hear. I'm very happy about that.
Partly
Excellent.
because I don't ever touch them, so there's no way that it's going to be hacked online. But there's other reasons which we can get into.
Yeah,
Good.
so,
I'm excited because I also have MyEtherWallet.
Yeah, as do I. And there's been an awful lot of talk about hacks and DNS servers and people having their stuff just taken out of their wallet when they went on and opened it up. So tell us what's going on, Joe, because actually, I mean, it's a pretty technical topic, and I think people really want to appreciate and understand what's going on with the whole stories of MyEtherWallet.
Yeah, so on Tuesday, there was a bit of a alert going around the internet that MyEtherWallet has been compromised. Don't go to MyEtherWallet. People losing funds and stuff like that. And so what appeared to happen is there was some sort of DNS hack. So MyEtherWallet, the web server, wasn't touched, but the DNS was attacked. And so that means, kind of in simpler terms, DNS, or the domain name service, is used by every computer on the internet to convert the friendly thing that you type into your web browser into the address, the IP address, the dotted quads or the IPv6 or whatever you want to call it, the numbers that uniquely identify a computer on the internet. And it's a phone book of sorts. So you look at the phone book, you go to the M's, and you look for MyEtherWallet, and it says the address is 52 dot blah, 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 blah. So it's 4 numbers. Actually, it's, if you, I can look it up right here. Looks like I'm getting the bad IP address, potentially. So it's may or may not be correct. But anyways, you have this phone book that converts a friendly name into a bunch of numbers.
Right.
What happened is that somewhere along the line, and I think they're still figuring out what's going on to figure out where the hack actually happened, whose DNS servers were hacked. But the DNS servers were modified so that they gave out bad information.
Right.
So somebody snuck in, took the phone book, scribbled out the right IP address, put in the wrong IP address, and now when people go to MyEtherWallet, they go to a bad website.
Ouch. So they're basically being redirected to someplace other than where they're supposed to go.
Yeah, well, more directed rather than redirected, but yeah.
Okay.
So
if that happens, how are their coins actually vulnerable? Because they've hit a different, website entirely, right? So how are their coins actually being exposed in that case? Or is it because they're logging in with their private keys, and by giving their private keys away, they've...
Exactly.
Right. Okay. I worked it out myself while we're talking about it.
Yeah, exactly. So
see, I'm actually in crypto, Joe. I can figure it out sometimes.
Yeah, it pretty much makes sense. If you go, this is what's generally known as a phishing attack, and that it's a website that looks legitimate. This is done a lot with login and passwords. So you get an email that says there's a notification in your bank account. Please click this link. And at least 3 of the words are misspelled, but nobody really seems to care. They click the link anyways, and there's it looks like their bank login page with some images missing, but nobody seems to care. Everyone falls for it. And so you enter your login and password, and it's oh, there's an error logging in. What's going on here? Meanwhile, the login and password for your bank now exists in somebody else's hands. They're going to log into your bank and do not so great stuff. That's what happened here with MyEtherWallet. So somebody put up a site that looks like MyEtherWallet, which is really easy because MyEtherWallet is an open source project. So you just clone the GitHub repository, prop it up on a website, and it looks legitimate, except for something which I'll get into in a minute. And then people just go and like, oh, I want to send coins. So they put their private key into the website. And once you send your private key to somebody, you can't get it back, and they can take all of your money because your private key is your coins.
Well, it's your key into your safe. So if you give the key to the safe away, you've just pretty much said, have at it, and you can give me the key back when you're done taking everything out of my safe.
Exactly. Right. And so that's what happened here.
So let me ask another question then. So let's just say, for example, I wanted to get into my MyEtherWallet now, and I want to make sure that I'm able to, access it securely now. How do I do that? Let's just say that I am using it through a browser, and I don't have it set up so it's connected with an offline wallet, for example, which we'll talk about because I know you want to get into that a bit too. So what would you advise someone like me to do that's going to say, well, normally I just access it by going on to the web browser right now. So what do I do? Is there something?
So one of the most important things to do, and this goes for just about any website you use, whether it's your bank website, your email, MyEtherWallet, whatever it is, in your address bar, there's going to be a little lock that says secure. So if I go to MyEtherWallet right now, it has a little lock at the top that says secure, and I can actually click on it and look at the certificate information and ensure that the website that I'm at is myetherwallet.com. And the way it uses this is with certificates, and these certificates are only issued to the legitimate company, unless the certificate issuer gets hacked or social engineered into giving out a certificate, which does happen on occasion, but not often enough that you need to freak out about it all the time. But you go to MyEtherWallet, and this was happening to a lot of people. They would see a big alert from their browser, maybe a small alert, depending on which browser they use, that says this site, the certificate does not match the name, because the site is issuing a certificate that says, like a self-signed certificate that's not valid. And it says, hey, the certificate is for myetherwallet.com, but it's not signed by a trusted authority. Right. So your browser is going to reject it and say, no, this isn't myetherwallet.com. This is some imposter. Or if they go to it and they just don't use secure connection, there won't be a lock there at all. And so always look for the green lock to make sure that the site is secured. So, but the first thing I should mention is always enter the address by hand. Don't click any links that somebody sends you. Either bookmark it yourself once you know it's secure, or enter it by hand, because somebody can create a MyEtherWallet with one of the L's replaced with a 1 or something, so it looks like an L, and get a certificate for that website. And get you to click on the link to make it look legitimate. And so you'll still see a green lock that says the site's secure, but you're going to a completely different website.
Oh, so first, make sure the little green lock is sitting. So when you're looking at your browser, you've got like the little green lock, and then you've got the word MyEtherWallet Inc. /US, and then you've got the HTTPS / www.myetherwallet.com. So it's that little green, as I just went to look myself. So it's that little green lock that sits there where it says view information, and then I can look at certificate where it says valid. And when I click on the certificate, it actually says www.myetherwallet.com issued by DigiCert SHA-2 extended validation server.
Yep.
So I know that it's from myetherwallet.com, unless of course it's from myetherwa11et.com, but pretty unlikely.
Right. Okay. So yeah, make sure that the address at the top of your address bar is exactly what it should be. Best way to do that is type it in yourself.
Yep.
And check for things. And then make sure that green lock is there.
Okay.
And that's the simplest way to be, pretty like 99% sure that you're at the right thing.
Awesome.
There are a couple of browser extensions that you can install. I believe MetaMask does it. But there's a couple of other ones that have a centralized database of bad websites. So if your DNS was affected by the hack that came out Tuesday, you would go to the website, and then this browser extension would block you from MyEtherWallet, the fake MyEtherWallet, because it says this is not real. So there are some browser extensions that you can do to put in to make sure that you're not going to a phishing site. Now, they do take a little bit of time to get updated. So if somebody releases a new website, somebody has to be tricked into going there, realizing that it's a bad website, and block it. And then the network just adds it to the blacklist to say, nope, this is a bad thing, and continue on. So you want to be, there is a little bit of delay, but chances are you being the very first person through the door are pretty slim.
Okay.
Joe, quick question. So let's say you accidentally do click into the phishing site. At what point is the point of no return where they will take your money? Like, is it up until you submit your private keys, or can you get out, or will they have access the moment you step into that bad site?
Generally, at the point where you enter your private key information. Okay. Now, there is the potential that if they're using some sort of zero-day browser exploit, you go to the website, it does some stuff, it convinces the browser to run some code in privileged space and installs some malware, and that malware starts reading your memory and looking for private keys and just, steals it there. There is that chance of happening, but that is rather rare. Right. The most effective hacking is social engineering, and that's essentially what a phishing site is. In this case, it's a combination of phishing and hacking. So they hacked the DNS and then pointed you to do the thing. But
pretty sophisticated then, isn't it, what they've done? Because the DNS hack is not that easy to do, is it?
No. It depends on how they did it. So if they called up tech support on some company and said, hey, my name's MyEtherWallet and I need to, and I'm here to say I need to change my DNS every day, then you'd go through and convince somebody that we need to change the DNS or reset the DNS password so they can access it.
Wow.
So, or they could have, found some exploit on the DNS server and poked into it. I don't think they've released the post-mortem of what actually happened yet. It says a couple of DNS servers were hijacked to resolve MyEtherWallet users to be redirected to a phishing site. This is not on the MyEtherWallet side. We're in the process of verifying which servers to get it resolved ASAP. The report was that only Google's honest DNS servers were affected, which doesn't, which means that only a subset of the internet was affected, only those that used those DNS servers. So one of the things that you can do to help prevent this attack is use things like Google's Honest DNS or CloudFront's DNS and point your browser there, because normally your computer uses the DNS server that your ISP gives you. And there's a lot of links in that chain that can go wrong. So if somebody, convinces your little small town ISP, gets in there and tweaks with the domain, with the DNS server there, it can serve bad results to you.
So you're talking about things like double checking DNSs. Do you have anything that you've written up that people can, or that others have written up that you can point them to? Because not every user on our channel obviously is technical enough to understand, all the terminology with GitHub and DNS and that kind of thing. Is there anything that's been written to kind of guide people through the process to do what you're describing that you know of?
Yeah, I'm releasing a blog post here shortly to talk about a lot of the stuff I'm talking about here on this podcast. There's a lot of other things out there. In reality, you don't have to do a whole lot. The biggest thing is what I said: look for that green lock.
Yeah.
And if you want to protect yourself even further, you can try tweaking with your DNS things. But really, if you want to keep your keys safe, there's really only one good solution, and that's never type your keys into any internet-connected device.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And that's where things like hardware wallets come in, or offline signing machines. And for the normal user, a hardware wallet is going to be a lot easier than an offline signing machine, because not everybody has an extra machine lying around that they can configure to never talk to the internet and still be useful. So
do you want to tell us a little bit about offline hardware wallets and how do we connect them with Mu, or what do you think is the most important thing next to tell people, now that we've kind of talked about the Mu specific problem in terms of how we secure our coins, keeping our coins safe?
Yeah, I think hardware wallets is a good place to go next. So talked about it a little bit the last time I was on the podcast. You can ask me which hardware wallets I use, but the basic idea with a hardware wallet, like a Trezor or a Ledger or KeepKey, is that your private key is stored in a secure microchip on a hardware device, and the communication pathway to this microchip is locked down. So when you enter a private key onto your computer by entering the 12-word key or uploading your key file.json, that is data that sits inside your computer's memory. And any sufficiently privileged application can read that data. And if you enter it into a website, that website can read the data. Just about any extension you have installed on your browser can read that data. That is what we would say compromised data. When you have a hardware wallet, your private key is inside the hardware wallet. It doesn't leave the hardware wallet. And when you want to send a transaction, you want to send money, the software takes the transaction data, sends it to the hardware wallet, and says, please sign this with the private key. And in simple terms, signing is a way of putting the private key signature on that bit of data so that it can't be tampered with, and so that you know that you have the authority of that private key.
Yeah.
And this is what keeps the block, things going on. You have your Bitcoin address, you need to spend it. You basically say, hey, I have the private key to all of these public addresses that we've been talking about, so I authorize this transaction to go through. So that I didn't turn off my ringer. So that
they could join the podcast, Joe. It's no problem.
It looked like a spam call, so there's no.
They were phishing, were they?
It's possible. I've been getting a lot of spam from a Chinese spam caller, robocaller. It's really funny. I'll just sit and listen to the ni hao, this like long string of Chinese. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I have no idea what they're saying.
So Joe, I'm getting the same thing. Like, I get a lot of calls from New York City, exact same thing, but I've just been blocking that number. But it's weird. It's been happening for the last week.
Yeah. And there's a really fun trick that spammers use now, where they kind of spoof or get in legal or illegal or not so great ways the exchange number that you have. So I get let's say my phone number is 206-911-5555 or whatever. They'll figure out how to get the 911 prefix, so it looks like it's from my neighborhood or from someone I know, although it's a cell phone, so I don't have anybody else with that same prefix. But it looks legitimate because it looks like it's very close to me. And so I pretty much now, if I see any of my prefixes, because I have multiple phone numbers, any of my prefixes, the exchange number come through that matches mine, I'm like, that is obviously spam. Like, I don't know anybody with the same one, so sorry, goodbye.
Wow.
But anyway, so hardware wallets.
Yeah.
The the transaction is signed entirely within the hardware wallet without leaking any of the key information. If the hardware wallet is good, if the hardware wallet is not so good, then it can sort of leak this information in really, really interesting but way too technical to talk about here ways, including timing attacks and the like. But most good hardware keys are written to not leak information in this way. But you sign the transaction, the computer gets the transaction back, but the computer nor any of the apps on the computer or the internet at large, none of them can see your private key.
Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah, and so in this hack with MyEtherWallet, people that went to MyEtherWallet with a hardware key could send coins without them being stolen, because the hackers couldn't get the private key, and the hackers couldn't change the transaction data. So an important thing with the hardware wallets is most hardware wallets that have a screen will show you the address that you're sending the funds to. Verify that address. So if you're trying to send funds to address ABCD, MyEtherWallet, the fake MyEtherWallet that the hackers put up, could have said, oh, you typed in ABCD, I'm going to create a transaction that actually sends all these coins to all the coins in your wallet to DEF 9. And if you confirm that transaction and send it back, you lose your coins. But if you look at the screen and you don't see ABCD, but you see DEF 9, then hit cancel and go away from that website, because that means somebody is trying to mess with your stuff. But once you see ABCD and you sign that transaction on your hardware wallet, they can't tamper with that data. If they tamper with the data, the signature is invalid and that the network will reject that transaction. So just like when you go to MyEtherWallet or any website and you look for that green lock, when you use a hardware wallet, look at the screen and confirm that the address that you are attempting to send funds to is the address that shows up on that screen. Right. And if they are the same, then you can be assured that your transaction will go through, unless your hardware wallet has been compromised in some way. But it probably has not. Like the odds of that are, unless you're really, really, really bad, or you picked up your hardware wallet at a swap meet, then, you're probably okay. But buy your hardware wallet from a legitimate place.
Right.
Even Amazon can be weird because anybody can be an Amazon marketplace seller. So make sure that if you buy like a ledger, that is coming from Ledger or Amazon as the marketplace seller, and not, we are totally not hackers marketplace sending you a key, or better yet, go directly to the source. Ledger.co, I think, or Trezor.com or Trezor.io. Do a Google search, you'll find them.
Right. Really good advice.
Yeah.
Wow. So I think I recall some months ago, Joe, you and I had been talking about the fact that there was a firmware update required on the Ledger Nano S. Is that right? Do I recall that correctly?
Yeah, so a month or so ago, they released a firmware update because there were a couple of weaknesses in the existing firmware. Mm-hmm. The fact of the matter is, you probably aren't affected if you bought your ledger directly from the company. You're likely unaffected.
Okay.
You might have been affected if if you bought it from somebody else, because there were 2 or 3 vulnerabilities or weaknesses in the previous firmware. One was you could load malicious firmware onto the device, and the verification for the firmware wasn't quite good enough, and there was a way to circumvent it. There was also another way to have it sort of deterministically generate keys. So when you have your hardware wallet generate keys, the idea is that you want unique, the only person in the universe with these keys. And that's pretty, with good random number generation, that's pretty likely, because the number of possible keys is practically infinite.
Yeah.
You're not gonna collide anytime soon. But if you have deterministic generation, this was a fun thing. One of the Linux distributions, I think it was Debian, they had weak random number generation for your SSH keys. So a lot of Linux servers run SSH, and it's pretty darn secure. So people run it internet facing, and it encrypts the data back and forth between the two things. Before this existed, plain text passwords across the internet, it was madness. But SSH came out, and now you have a secure encrypted communication. But it turns out that the random number generation wasn't strong. They cut a step on accident, and so a lot of the keys that were regenerated were the same.
Oops.
I think there was only 65,000 different keys possible, or something like that, because it used the program ID and nothing else. And so there's actually a tool on the internet right now. You can check to see if your key signature is a weak one, because now there's only 65,000 keys. Somebody can generate all of them in about 30 seconds, and can read any data that's going across the internet using these keys.
Right.
Bad idea. That happens with your wallet. Boom. Somebody else sees an address that they recognize because they've generated the private key for that. They just steal your funds.
Yeah. So let me ask you. Go ahead. I've got two other questions that are kind of burning here related to this.
I was just going to say that to remind people that your coins are not stored on your wallet. Your coins exist on the network, and your keys just prove that you have access to that. So somebody can generate the exact same keys as you and get your funds. So just because you have a hardware wallet doesn't mean that you're safe if you're sloppy with your keys.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay. So what I was going to ask you is, she talked about the firmware update that was issued. So I started thinking about the fact that you'd have to have downloaded some software and upgraded your firmware on your ledger. And is there any risk in doing that you could either download the wrong software, or the software itself had something wrong with it that would expose something that people wouldn't have anticipated? Or is that something that people don't need to worry about?
Generally, you don't need to worry about it. Unless you go off reservation. So most hardware wallets, through the standard firmware update process, will verify that the firmware that you're uploading
is correct.
Is correct. Is from a valid source.
Right.
So
like Microsoft Update, the updates are coming from Microsoft, so you don't have to think about it. And with the other vendors, it's presumably about the same.
Yeah. There are ways that you can force. So some people don't trust the firmware or want to double check that the firmware that they're getting is fine, so they build the firmware themselves and they upload it themselves. And in that case, it can't be verified in that way. So there's ways of bypassing a verification if you really, really want to.
Yeah.
So if you use the tool that you get from the firmware website and you use the firmware there and you upload it properly, and most of these with screens will verify things. So there will be a signature or something that says, here's the hash. Do you really want to install this version? And you can look at it and say, yeah, that's the one I want to install. Or it could say, hey, someone's trying to push firmware without being validated to your device. Do you really want to do this? you probably want to say no, unless you know for certain that's what you're doing. And if you're listening to this podcast trying to get security advice, you're probably not one of these people.
Right. Okay.
So just do the normal stuff. Like if you want to, if you know what I'm talking about to bypass the firmware, then you probably already know how to do that. So don't bypass the safety checks. Don't take off. Just buckle your seatbelt for the entirety of the flight, even while seated and even when there's no turbulence, because sometimes turbulence strikes without warning, and you don't want to be one of the passengers with your face where the oxygen masks come from,
or clearly planted into the front of the person in front of you.
Yeah.
So the second question I had, Joe, was, I mean, I think with Mu in particular, MyEtherWallet, it's not just being used for storing Ether, because it's an ERC20 wallet, which we've talked about in previous episodes. So as a reminder to our listeners, it's a wallet that's used for storing a variety of coins that sit on the Ether network. Other projects that have done their ICOs and listed their coins by leveraging Ether as their kind of underlying platform. So with people sitting on the Mu that have other coins that they've put there from airdrops or from coins that they've got from other ICOs or whatever, are those coins also able to be backed up onto a keep key or a ledger?
Yes. So again, MyEtherWallet doesn't store anything. MyEtherWallet is just an interface to access the blockchain, to access the Ethereum network. And the tokens that you have are associated with your address. So if your address is 0x212121 whatever, in a smart contract somewhere for ETH Horse, shout out to ETH Horse, there is an entry in that smart contract's data that says address 0x212121 has 100 horse, 100 tokens. And if you want to spend those tokens, you send a transaction to that smart contract that says, hey, I want to spend 50 horse. I want to send 50 horse to this other address. And in order for that transaction to go through, you have to sign it with your private key. So MyEtherWallet allows you to send these transactions. It pretty much just allows you to post a transaction to the network, and a ERC20 token is just a special transaction that calls smart contract functions. Right. So when you if your private key is on your hardware wallet, you have to use your hardware wallet to sign the transaction. Okay. So you're safe there.
So are there any limitations on what coins can be backed up? I don't mean the coins are being backed. I understand you're putting the reference to the private key information. The data is being stored on the ledger in order to be able to access it for the future. So are there any limitations on what coins can be effectively backed up on an offline wallet?
Theoretically, no. In practice, it's all down to software support. Okay. So as I mentioned last time, I have 4 or 5 hardware wallets. I have the Trezor Model T, the Keep Key, the Digital Bitbox, the Ledger Nano S. They all have various levels of support. So a lot of them now are going to use MyEtherWallet as their interface. Okay. So the new Trezor wallet, you can do your Bitcoin, you can do your Bitcoin Cash, you can do your Ripple, a bunch of coins supported inside of that app. But when you want Ethereum, it just kicks you over to MyEtherWallet. Okay. Because MyEtherWallet is a great interface. It's very powerful, and then people don't have to write their own software. They can just go to MyEtherWallet. And then the firmware on the hardware wallet itself needs to be able to support those keys. So something like a Digital Bitbox, it's like 1 or 2 people behind that project. It's a great project, but the software support isn't as strong. So you've got Bitcoin, you've got Ethereum, you have a couple of others, but if you want to go down in the weeds and Purecoin or something else, Dogecoin, you probably can't put them on that wallet. So that hardware wallet, you can store the. So I'm trying to be technically correct, but I think I might get people confused. So you just can't use that software to access those coins.
Right.
However, I have the same on a couple of my devices. I have the same seed. So I have I think my keep key and one of my Trezors have the same seed. And the seed is the thing you really need to keep secret. But from the seed, most coins worth their salt support what's called a hierarchical derived wallet or an address. So you have the seed, and then from the seed you can use a path that says for coin number 1, for account 0, for sub account 1, generate me an address. And this is a well-defined standard. So whether I'm using the keep key or the Trezor, I can go in and derive the exact same private key from that seed. So I can have the same seed in 2 different hardware wallets, and those might support 2 separate keys or 2 separate kinds of coins, and have some overlap. Like they both support Bitcoin and Ethereum, but one of them supports Dogecoin, the other one supports Dash, whatever. The same key can be used on both of those hardware wallets to access different sets of coins. And then later on down the road, if one of the hardware wallets adds coin support that the other one had, then I can actually use those coins from both hardware wallets now, because it's all about the software generating the keys and being able to sign transactions in a specific way for those coins.
Right.
Okay.
Not for the faint of heart. There's a lot to learn for people that want to have their coins safe, but clearly storing coins in a MyEtherWallet, having something like MetaMask that's providing a layer of protection when you log in, and then storing the coins someplace like a ledger or a keep key or a Trezor, all combined are giving you a lot more security as a user on your coins than just leaving them sitting there with the potential of just being taken away because of something you just didn't catch when it comes to all the layers of security that are out there. Would that be an accurate summary?
That is pretty accurate, yes.
Very good. Wow, I'm getting it.
So
I love it. Thank you, Joe. You're my oracle of crypto wisdom. If I start calling you the Oracle, say the Oracle's back on the episode today.
Yes. So
Joe the Oracle.
I want to make sure I get in here.
Can we call you the Joe?
I do want to make sure I get in here that the Joe the Oracle speaks. May the followers of the Oracle listen. No, so no discussion of hardware wallets and storing private keys and the like is complete without talking about backups. So an important thing to remember is that your private key is the only way to access your coins. If you lose your private key, those coins are lost forever. Well, until probably quantum computing comes and cracks your keys, but that's a long way off. Your coins are lost forever if you lose your private key. There is no technical support in the world you can call to get your coins back if you lose your private key. So if you store something on your hardware wallet is a physical device. It's generally pretty tough, but it can break, it can stop working, it can get corrupted, it can get lost, it can get broken. It can do a whole bunch of things that will result in the loss of your funds. If your funds are worth spending $100 on a hardware wallet to save them, and I say if you have enough coins that you're going to be kind of annoyed that you didn't spend $100 to protect them, then you probably need to get a hardware wallet. If you only have $20 worth of coins, it's not worth buying a $100 hardware wallet to protect $20 worth of coins. But if you have any significant value of coins such that it feels like somebody punched you in the stomach if you lost that money, you should probably get a hardware wallet. And if you are in that situation, you should probably back up your keys once or twice. There was a saying in Google SRE when I was there that 1 is none and 2 is 1. So when talking about backups or failovers and the like, if you have one copy of the data, then you essentially have 0 copies of the data.
That's right.
Because if that one copy of the data gets destroyed in a fire, or because you leave your hardware wallet in your pocket when you go to do your laundry, I've done that. Then you do not have your stuff anymore. That's why you have a backup. I have a backup.
So you were basically just to clarify, you were laundering your crypto.
Yes. Actually, I'm simplifying the story. I was cleaning my backpack after Burning Man. It was dusty, and I'd left it in a pocket, and that pocket is mostly water resistant. So the device came out unscathed. I was merely making I was trumping it up as an object lesson for the class, but you called me out on it. I didn't actually launder my Bitcoin. I just merely got moist. I had moist Bitcoin.
But the story stood so well with the idea that you actually put your Bitcoin ledger into a washing machine. I mean, that's if you don't call that laundering your Bitcoin, I don't know what laundering your Bitcoin is, because it's the closest thing you're going to get to sticking it into a laundry.
Yeah, sorry to disappoint you. I've not actually laundered any Bitcoin. However,
not in the truest sense of
so if you only have one copy, you have 0 copies.
Right.
If you have 2 copies, if you have a single backup, then you essentially only have 1 copy. And if you only have 1 copy, you have 0 copies. So we usually had 2 N+2. So we had 2 backups for everything like that. So if you have private keys of any sort that you care about where they're at, don't leave them on a single piece of paper next to your computer. One, if somebody else gets a hold of your private keys, they get a hold of all your coins. Game over. But if that piece of paper gets lost, fades, gets in the laundry, whatever, then you've lost your coins.
Yeah.
So
what you're describing is what corporates do in terms of redundant systems. Or if you look at like how the space shuttle is designed, that they've got a backup and then a backup of the backup in some cases, because you can't afford life support to go down. So you've always got another one, and even if that goes down, you've still got a third one. Yep.
So you want redundancies, and in a good disaster recovery plan, you can read all about disaster recovery theory. Depending on how much you're storing, you probably don't need to go quite so crazy, but you want a diversity in location. You want a diversity in type of storage. So if you have 3 pieces of paper that have your key on it, you've written it down in 3 places, and you put all those in a file folder and you put it in the same filing cabinet, well, you really haven't made anything redundant, because a fire comes through and burns all 3 of those pieces of paper. Somebody steals that file folder, they steal all 3 pieces of paper. Like, you don't have any redundancies. So you generally want to do something like have one at a safe in your house, have one at a safe deposit box, and maybe store one with somebody you really, really trust, like a lawyer or something like that, and ideally have something encrypted if you do that way, so that if there is a natural disaster or a fire or something, you don't lose all copies of your data. This holds true whether you use when you have backup. If you have a computer and you back up your computer onto a hard drive and you have the computer and the hard drive sitting on the same desk, you are okay when one of those hard drives fails, but if a hurricane comes through and destroys your house, you've lost both pieces of data.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great piece of advice, Joe.
Yeah. Do not store your private key on the cloud, though. It's okay to back up your tax returns to Google Drive. Don't put your private key on any computer that's connected to the internet, because it's way too easy to get that private key data. Always use physical copies. So what I generally do is I have my hardware wallet, and sometimes I have two hardware wallets for the same key. Then I have a piece of paper usually, but I also have there's a product called CryptoSteel. I've also done the same sort of thing with a metal punch kit and some round metal die, but or small metal discs. But the CryptoSteel is this big hunkin' piece of metal that folds open, and inside of it there are metal punched letters that you put in. So you put your key into this thing. You can slap a big padlock on it. Not that a real padlock stops anybody, because lock picking and bolt cutters. But you can put this here, and this thing can go through a fire, and you should still be able to get your private key stuff back. So you get the CryptoSteel, and you store a key on that, and you store that in a really safe place that nobody can get to. And the likelihood of that being destroyed is very small. And so I have, for my most important ones, I have hardware wallet, CryptoSteel, a second set of metal punched discs on a keychain, and then I have the original piece of paper stored away someplace safe. And I use, for the weaker versions of these, like the piece of paper, I use encrypted key storage. So there's a way to encrypt your mnemonic so that you have to have a password in order to get to it. So if somebody finds this piece of paper, they can't just enter my private key, get to it. They have to also know the password. And also don't forget your password, because if you forget your password...
Living Joe's life sounds like living Mission Impossible now, because you've set it all up, right? So we have to follow the trail to try to access your stuff.
Yeah. It's going to be difficult. Not impossible. This is not a challenge.
The crypto challenge. Can you find Joe's private keys? No, thank you. We don't want to do that. That's not a good idea. People, please do not go after Joe. He's a good guy. He's here to help us.
I am a good guy. I'm here to help you.
And he's told Joe.
I probably have less than you think I do, and it's not worth your time.
So are there any...
And besides, in reality, I think there's an XKCD cartoon for this. Like, if somebody wants to get your private keys, a $3 pipe wrench is going to do the job just as well as Mission Impossible. Like, you don't need, rappelling gear and black leotards and a balaclava. You just need a $3 pipe wrench. Get it at any hardware store, and just a dark alley. That's all you need to get somebody's private keys.
Yeah, scary thought. But that's, we're not encouraging the 101 ways that people can try to get private keys out of people either. I've heard some terrible stories about that as well. People being held at gunpoint to give private keys or to give their wallet addresses or transfer money out. So, these are all the horrible outcomes of owning and managing our own money. So, as you say, having multiple backups and having it secured and safe and not on you are all probably really good things.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So some features, some hardware wallets, and actually a lot of good security systems have this as well, is the duress feature, or the plausible deniability feature, where somebody comes up to your pipe wrench and you've got a hardware wallet. And on this hardware wallet, let's say you're a whale. Let's say you're storing $25 million worth of Bitcoin. And somebody comes up to you with a pipe wrench and says, unlock your hardware wallet so I can steal all your money. You're like, what, this hardware wallet? And they plug it in the computer and you enter your password, and there's $123 worth of Bitcoin. Because you can enter a separate password.
Oh, right.
Okay.
you have one password that unlocks the Scrooge McDuck vault, and you have another password that unlocks the coin purse.
Smart.
And so if somebody's trying to steal your coin purse or if somebody's trying to steal your money, you give them the coin purse. I have 2 wallets when I go around. One wallet has, all of my driver's license, the credit cards I use the most, my medical stuff, and the other wallet has stuff that is far easier to replace that I don't mind if it's missing, and it's like some money. So if I get held up, that's the wallet they get, and then I can still, I'm not completely out of.
So it's a good place to store all your expired credit cards.
Yeah. Like having a decoy wallet, you can just throw at somebody with like $7 of cash and a bunch of cards you don't care about.
Right.
It's a great way to get out of a mugging situation.
Yeah. So if you don't know what to do with your expired credit cards, go buy yourself a cheap wallet, stick them in there, and keep them in a wallet that's ready for anybody that might mug you.
Yeah. Now see that now that I've put all this information out on the internet, I'm going to have like 15 passwords in my hardware wallet.
And 7 wallets.
So you carry 3 wallets. Yeah.
You have a wallet in every back pocket and in your back pocket and of course in your backpack, which is supposedly waterproof.
Yeah. So like, open your Bitcoin wallet here. No, open the real one here. No, open the real one here. No, open the real one.
This one has a padlock on it, so if you've got the lock, what do you call it, the picks, then you can go ahead and open it yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, Joe, you're a crazy man. Yeah. Hey, any parting thoughts before we wrap up today? It's been an absolutely amazing episode. So many takeaways. I couldn't even begin to summarize them all, other than have backups, have 2 rather than 1, and make sure you keep yourself safe, because it is your money and it's your responsibility. But is there anything else, Joe, that you really want people to have as the big takeaway?
Well, just be vigilant. So we're still in early days. The user experience isn't that great. It's hard to do crypto. It's hard to be secure just in general on the internet, let alone with this stuff that's you can't back out transactions.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good point.
Just be on the lookout. If something looks fishy, walk away from it. If you get an email that says click here, your account has been compromised, click here and enter your private keys, don't click there. Don't enter your private keys. Just delete that email.
Please do not enter your private keys anywhere except on your own stuff. Don't be tempted or clickbaited into putting your private keys on anything, because it means that you've been, suckered into doing it, not because it was your intent, but because it was someone else's. Right?
Yeah.
To summarize it in a simple way, just put it in when you meant to, not because someone asked you to. And if you see someone saying, here's an airdrop, just send us some Ether and we'll send you some free coins. People, it wasn't free. And equally, if it says, give us your private keys and we'll deposit coins to you, you're actually, being very naive to think that anyone's going to give you anything for free when you've just given them the key to your house.
Yeah, and if Steve private messages you on Telegram, because you're on the Co-Investors... Yeah, if you're on the Co-Investors Telegram, it's probably not Steve.
In fact, so going back to that rule, I as a rule, I don't PM people. If people want to get in touch, they can get in touch and PM me, or they message me on LinkedIn, or they can PM me on my on Telegram, of course, and I'll reply. But as a rule, I don't do that for the very reason you've described, Joe, because there are people out there spoofing me and pretending to be me already. So I have to be vigilant in saying I'm not going to PM people unless I actually know them and we've connected by phone number first. So it's an unfortunate outcome of the way that crypto is making people become a little bit over the top and scammy. And this guy, Joe Wasson, I was talking to earlier today, it turned out it wasn't even you.
Ha.
No, I'm just kidding.
No, I was gonna say,
I'm just joking.
I've already been spoofed on the Telegram chat through other people. Like somebody spoofed me and tried to get some of the coin on our chat area. They try to get them to buy into someone else's ICO, which was like a big deal. So yeah, same thing happens to people who are not as heavily invested like I am.
Yeah. And Joe,
if you missed any of this, I'm going to have a blog post on my website, talljoe.com, TALLJOE.com. So I'll have a summary of a lot of the stuff I spoke about here.
I was just going to ask you to do your shameless plug of your URL, but you beat me to it. So talljoe.com, lots of blogs, lots of great content. I love your site, Joe. It's coming along amazingly. So keep up the great work there, and we'll continue looking at it. Yuri, any final thoughts before we depart?
No, this has been fantastic. Thank you, Joe. As always, I've learned a tremendous amount from you. So thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me on the show.
And thank you, everyone, for listening in to another, what I would say, pretty fantastic episode of the Coin Chat, talking about all sorts of things technical to the moon. Until next time.